Okay, we'll give ourselves just a moment to do the retweeting to help people know that we are now doing a live stream, and then we'll get going. Like, you think you can retweet faster than I can?
Hopefully.
So far, I'm not exactly going quickly. The real trick is to find it on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay, so once done, now see LinkedIn. Oh, nice. So, okay, that's okay, that's the very thing. Someone's actually on LinkedIn right now. If you go to the Nylas webpage, you're gonna see appearing there live, and it actually have like subtitles as we're speaking, which is
really
weird. Yes.
Oh, that's strange.
You go to the main page.
Okay.
And I found it here. Let me retweet it, and we can actually start this thing.
Okay, great. Let's keep people waiting no longer. We'll go ahead and get started.
Yes. All right.
We'll experiment actually getting the word out about when we're live. All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're watching live or tuning in on YouTube later on, where we're keeping a growing library of our live streams over time. My name is Ash. I'm the Director of Developer Relations for Nylas.
Hi, I'm Black, Senior Developer Advocate at Nylas.
Cool. All right. So we are coming today with some content that we actually planned on bringing on Friday, yet all of Canada was without internet, it seems, and Black here is in Ottawa.
Yeah, it was pretty hard. It lasted until Saturday morning. It was crazy.
Wow. Well, we miss you, and it's exciting that we can just kind of pick up where we left off. So if we go back a week ago on Wednesday last week, you walked us through an example scenario of using PHP to work with Nylas. The reason we wanted to call it PHP specifically was that it's a popular programming language for server side, and it's also one that we don't currently ship an SDK for. So Nylas has SDKs for Node, Java, Ruby, and Python. That doesn't mean that if we don't have an SDK for your language of choice, you can still work with Nylas in the Nylas platform. So we just wanted to really start to illustrate that point by just showing some very basic maneuvers using just standard, HTTP stacks inside of a given language environment. So last week it was PHP. And today we're going to run through a couple of examples with two different languages. Black, what are those languages going to
be? Today we're going to see Rust and C#. And please keep in mind that I'm not an expert in any of those. So if you see something that doesn't look right, excuse me, but I'm doing my best.
And presumably the samples that you're going to show us will find their way to our GitHub organization. So we have, I'll put it on the screen here. We have this GitHub organization, Nylas-samples, and it's got all kinds of really good stuff in there that show you some, well, anywhere from just basic common maneuvers for the API all the way to kind of like bigger, sort of more fleshed out applications. So eventually I think these samples will show up there too. So if you see something and you say, hey, that's not how we do this in Rust, great. Feel free to tell us with a pull request.
Yes, exactly. We're more than happy to change it.
Okay, so I think we've got the situation right. We're a Rust developer or a C# developer, and we want to use Nylas. There's no SDK, but that's not going to stop us because we can still work with the platform, and you're going to show us how that works. So why don't we jump in from the user perspective and just show in this situation what the user workflow is.
Okay, sure. So it's going to be simple. Just we're going to get the user input, and we're going to prepare that input for Nylas. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make a request to Nylas, and we're going to handle the response. So pretty much, we're going to ask the user for a subject, who the email is getting to, what's going to be the body. Then we're going to send the email, and then we're going to print a response displaying that it was sent correctly.
And so in this situation, right, again, it's as you just showed us, get the user input, prep the input, make an HTTP request, and then handle the response. Pretty common scenario. And in this situation, to keep things simple so that we can kind of just show you a couple of different languages, we're going to keep it all in the terminal. So Black's prepared a couple of example scripts that are going to prompt the user in the terminal for some input. Based on that, send that request and then show the response as raw JSON right in the terminal.
Yes, exactly. So let me share my screen. First, I'm just going to execute both, and then we're going to be able to see the source code. So we're going to start with Rust. It's already compiled. So I just need to call it application, send email. So for the subject, it's going to be hello from Rust. Who's going to receive the email? It's going to be myself. And I just need to put my email here. And then it's going to ask me for the body. So I'm going to send this email was sent using Rust and the Nylas APIs. So when I hit enter, we're going to receive what is returning from the HTTP call. And as you can see, it looks ugly. It's not formatted. And that's my fault because I'm not sure how to do that in Rust. So that's some way that people can help me by doing a pull request and let me know, hey, you need to actually do this to make it look nicer.
But either way, we've all seen a JSON response before. That initial OK at the beginning looks like a very, if I remember my Rust correctly, and it's been a year since I've last touched it, but that OK at the beginning reminds me very much of like different Rust constructs. I don't even know the word for it. Yeah, but either way, like inside of that
envelope for the response, right?
Say that one more time.
It's kind of like an envelope for the response.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so like inside of that OK, you see the parentheses there, and then in that is your unparsed JSON. So if you can ignore all the line breaks and stuff, you can see you're getting the account ID, and Blag is currently highlighting the snippet of the body that he just entered. So again, we just went through that full workflow of prompt the user for input, get that input, prep it, and all of the prepping happened behind the scenes. We'll look at that in a moment. And then behind the scenes, a request was made from the Rust script, and then we handled the response and put it here in the terminal.
And I can actually go to my mailbox, and here you see hello from Rust. So if I open it, this email was sent using Rust and the Nylas APIs, so you can see that it actually worked.
Yeah, I'll say too that like Blag, anytime you're making a new sample, I always can tell because my inbox starts filling up with hello from insert your favorite programming language here.
Okay, so now let's go with C#. It's going to be kind of like exactly the same. It's going to be, it's going to be executable. So it's going to ask for the same. This time it's going to be hello from C#. I'm going to be the recipient, then my email. And then the body is going to be kind of like exactly the same. Email was sent using C# and the Nylas APIs. For this one, you're going to see that the output is way nicer. And how I managed to make it work here. So it's going to pre-print way better.
Cool. Yeah, so same type of response. This one's just been parsed. So unlike the Rust example, but either way, similar maneuver. And so you can see here that we're focusing to keep things simple in this example. Everything's in the terminal. But you can imagine, instead of prompt line by line in the terminal, it might be a situation where you have a UI in a browser, for example, that takes all of that user input and then sends it to your server, which then hands it off to Nylas. So I think from here, what we'll want to focus on is just kind of diving into the code, because so far it's a little bit magical. You're typing some stuff in, hitting enter, getting a response, and then we go to your inbox and an email has been delivered.
And here's the proof that it works, just in case.
Just in case.
So let's jump into the source code. So for Rust first, what I did is basically I went and did a cargo new send email, press enter, and that created two files, a cargo.toml and a main.rs, which is the source code for Rust. So here I just put some information for the package. Here I'm gonna add the dependencies that I need to use, which is gonna be request for the HTTP request, features and Tokyo for async runtime, share the JSON to parse the JSON, and .m to actually read and .m file. Here I'm using this profile release just to make the executable a little bit smaller.
Really cool. So just for folks that aren't super familiar with Rust, that file there, that cargo.toml, that's the standard config file that everyone's going to use. So if you're not deep into Rust and aren't totally sure what's going on there, the main takeaway is that we've got a few dependencies that we wanted you to see up front, including the request module and a few other things.
Yeah, so basically when you compile the source code, it's going to go to the cargo toml, it's going to grab these dependencies, and it's going to add it to the application. So if you go to the source code, we're going to actually use those dependencies. Then we need to read our .m file because we need to create authorization. And for that, we need to do better and the access token. So that's going to a string that is going to validate our input. Then we're going to request the parameters. So we're going to ask for the subject, for the name, for the email of the recipient, and for the body. Once we have that, we're going to create a JSON structure, which is going to have the same. So the subject, the recipient, and the body. Then we're going to create our HTTP client. We're going to call the Nylas send endpoint. We're going to pass the authorization. We're going to pass the JSON structure that we created. So we're going to send the request. We're going to wait for the result. We're going to unwrap it. We're going to convert it to plain text. And finally, we're going to print it out. And here you can see that this is where I'm not actually pre-printing the JSON, just writing it as it is.
Cool. And so you can see, like, especially there on starting on line 57, I think this is one of the things where you can start to see, okay, so this is how you would, one way you would interact using Rust with the Nylas API or really any REST API. So if you compare it to, say, like our Python SDK, where you essentially configure the client up front, in this situation, what you're doing is you have all of these dot methods on the client object. I'm assuming it's not called an object, but in Rust, whatever it is, client.post, for example, and you pass in, again, like, you know, you're making a post request and you're using that particular endpoint, the /send endpoint. You add headers on yourself and then eventually tack on a body or something of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the nice things about Rust, that you can just kind of like daisy chain all the things that you want to do.
Yeah, super interesting to me as well that like the await comes at the very end of that chain and not at the very front of it, like it might say in like Node.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I learned Rust kind of like 8-9 years ago, and I haven't used it until now. So I'm a bit rusty.
Flag, how could you? Okay, yeah, it's that's amazing, because I think of Rust as something that, like, I'm not sure when Rust would have started, but you must have been a pretty early person to give it a try.
Yeah, I think so. I tend to do that. I'm kind of like obsessed with programming languages. So every time I see something new, I just try to learn it, at least kind of the very basics. So yeah, I was one of the early adopters.
Cool.
Okay, so now let's move to Visual Studio. So for Visual Studio, it's kind of the same. I just did .NET new, then send email to kind of like create the folder structure. And just like in Rust, this one is gonna have this send email C# project file and a program CS file. So this project here, we're going to say that we need the .NET EMP package, which is to read .env files, and the REST sharp package, which is actually to do HTTP requests. So once we compile our application, it's going to go here, and it's going to say, okay, these are the libraries that I need.
They're interesting that there's just fewer dependencies on this one than we've seen in other languages.
Yeah, that's right. So here we're just going to say, we're going to call the libraries, red sharp and system. Here we're going to load our .env file. We're going to ask for the subject, the name, the body. And then here we're going to initialize our API call, calling the Nylas send endpoint. Here we're going to say that we're going to make a post request because we're actually sending an email. We're going to add the authorization header that you can see better, plus the access token that we have on our env file. And here we're going to have the body of our JSON response, right? So it's going to be the body, the subject, who is getting the email, and whose email is getting to. So we're adding that to the body of our request. We're executing the request, and then we're simply printing it out. And of course, at the very end, we're using a console read so that our terminal doesn't just disappear once we hit enter.
Cool. And so, like, let's have a look again. You know, you can see one of the points of what we're trying to convey in these last couple of live streams is that you don't have to use an SDK to hit, or a REST endpoint. And this is yet another example of that. So up at the top, Blag is kind of constructed the client and prepped like what kind of method, HTTP method we're talking about. In this case, it's a post. We are sending data. And then starting on line 21, we have this large sort of very large concatenated string called body. There's probably multiple ways to do something like this in C#, I would imagine. But the main takeaway, I think, is that this particular construct is basically what the Nylas API is expecting you to send in order to send an email.
Yeah, and it's actually way clear here in Rust. So this should be exactly the same. You just need kind of like a JSON extractor where you're going to get the subject, the body, and who's going to receive the email. So probably there's a shorter way to do this on C#. I'm not entirely sure, but this works. So
yeah, I'm sure our C# and .NET friends know it well. I think the main point that we're wanting to convey here is that, as I'm sure a lot of us know, but sometimes it goes forgotten. If there's not an SDK for your particular language, doesn't mean that you're not supported. There are, there are always ways to make API calls from basically any language stack I've ever seen. So we're just trying to show a few examples. So over the last couple of sessions, we've looked at how to do this in PHP. We did an entire session on that. And then for this one, we basically replayed most of that same example, but you prepared examples in both Rust and C#.
Yeah, I wanted to do R and Julia as well, but I was like, probably it's too much. I mean, I can do it like 20, 30, it doesn't make sense, right? Like choosing a couple that are kind of nice, I think it's kind of enough to demonstrate that you can actually do that with any language that you want.
Yeah, and so Blag, for folks who haven't gotten to know him yet, is really big into programming languages across the board. And so maybe at some point we'll do one for fun that's totally not useful. I think you mentioned one, Blag, called a language that you were just looking at called Rockstar.
Rockstar, yes. Yeah, so in Rockstar, pretty much you code by writing lyrics.
Like lyrics to famous songs, right?
Yeah, kind of like that. It's pretty strange. So you can say, for example, I don't know, like the sea was calm, something like that. So I think the sea is a variable and calm is like 4 letters. So it's like you're assigning 4 to C, which is a variable. So it's weird, but it's pretty fun.
Well, for another time. For now, though, the main concept is, look, if you can make an HTTP request, then you can work with Nylas. We've shown you a few different examples of that. And then we'll have all of this stuff eventually posted on the places we normally post. So first up is the Nihilist Blog. There you can see authors from developer relations like Blag, and also our other developer advocates, Ram and Erica, quite frequently. We also work with people in engineering and product at Nylas to get them on the blog and talking about cool stuff. So we've got new content there for developers twice a week. Definitely worth checking out. Maybe giving it a follow in your RSS reader. And then also, we put a lot of samples into this GitHub organization that we mentioned earlier. So github.com/Nihilist-samples. Lots of really cool stuff there. I can't even remember how many samples we have off the top of my head, but it's not a small number.
We think we have like 30 or 40.
Yeah. So lots of good stuff there. And it really does range from like some basic kind of like scripts just to show you how like a particular maneuver works, all the way up to application level. And if you ever have requests for things that you want to see there that would be helpful for you as a developer working with Nylas, we'd love to hear that. Feel free to shoot us feedback. Probably at this point, the easiest place is, if not on social media, wherever you find us, you could also just go into our GitHub and ask questions there. All right. Well, thanks, Blag, for another really fun live stream. Folks can find you on Twitter at Blag.
Yeah, I make it easier for people to find me.
Yeah, you're Blag everywhere. I make it less easy. In this case, I'm on Twitter. I'm at @Ryan_IO. On some social medias, you can replace the underscore with a period or a dot. But either way, feel free to reach out. Let us know if there's other content you'd like us to live stream. We do this twice a week, typically on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Cool. All right. Bye. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.